Many business writing tasks require you to use evidence. This eMarketer report on audience segmentation and targeting uses expert testimony from a managing director at Google and a survey conducted by the Harris Poll. Evidence is shared in paragraphs and a table is used to display survey results. The writer explains the credibility and clearly displays the evidence for the reader to process. This lecture provides strategies to help you evaluate the credibility of evidence and effectively incorporate this in your written documents. You'll be evaluated on your ability to find and use credible sources in Business 305 assignments and in other business classes. While a great deal of evidence is available through a Google search, it is your task as the writer to evaluate the credibility before you include this in your message. Instead of using the first sources you find, evaluate each source to determine the most credible and relevant evidence to fulfill your goals and persuade your reader. Use these 4 criteria as you evaluate evidence. Look for an explanation of the author's credibility. There is frequently a link to author information in online articles. This example from Pew Research explains Amy Mitchell's expertise. Forbes provides information about each author, including their work experience and education. If you can't find information on the source website, try to find the author on LinkedIn to verify their expertise on the topic. Look for an explanation of the methods used to gather the information. This can help you evaluate how complete and recent the evidence is. Pew Research articles include a link to an explanation of the research methods. From this, you can see that their findings about baby boomer retirement are based on a sample of about 60,000 households. Mintel Reports explains the consumer survey used and the evidence used in their analysis. The Deloitte Blockchain Report provides the time period and sample size of their survey. If an article mentions evidence from another source, look for an explanation of the credibility of the primary source. In addition to including the author's expertise, this Scientific American article about information overload on social media includes a link to the research study published in the Journal of the Association for Information Science and Technology. This research study provides support for the claims made in the article. Following the links provided in online articles is a good way to help evaluate credibility. Work to find the most recent evidence possible. The specific timeframe necessary will change based on the evidence. Evidence such as technology innovations, social media preferences, and sales figures change quickly. This type of information requires recent sources. Within the last year is ideal. This source from 2019 on the U.S. home video market likely does not provide the most recent information available on the topic. However, some reports, such as the U.S. Census, take a long time to compile and become available to the public, and some reports are not published each year. Take time during the research process to find the most recent and credible sources on your topic. In Business 305, please avoid using the general sources listed here. While these are helpful websites for certain types of information, based on the Business 305 assignment topics, these are not the most credible sources to use. In each assignment, analyze the situation and reader to determine the best evidence to accomplish your goals. An excellent assignment will use the best sources possible, not just the first sources you found. You are always welcome to go beyond the required number of sources if this will help you to achieve your goals. An excellent assignment demonstrates a critical analysis of the reader's needs and the evidence this reader will find credible. Refer to the rubric and guidelines for each assignment. Expectations for selecting and citing evidence are always dependent on the reader. In other classes, be sure to adapt to the professor's expectations. Once you have selected evidence, this must be presented clearly and cited correctly in your message. As the writer, your job is to make the evidence and your argument clear to the reader. This takes time and thoughtful revision. Explaining evidence and the conclusions you made based on this evidence to both an expert and non-expert audience is a useful skill. As the writer, you will make decisions about the best way to present the evidence to your reader. Evidence can be provided in written text or using visual elements such as charts, graphs, and tables. When you use visual elements, be sure these are cited and referenced so the reader knows how they contribute to your argument. Sources are cited in a variety of ways in business documents depending on the industry, purpose, and reader. In an academic setting, you are familiar with using MLA or APA guidelines to cite your sources. In a business setting, it's unlikely that you will use these academic styles of citation. This research memo provided by KPMG cites multiple sources in each paragraph to justify their recommendations. Footnotes are a common way to cite sources, as shown in this government report. This way, the reader can review the credibility of the evidence on each page without having to search through the reference list to find the information. As you include evidence in your writing, explain the source credibility. Make it clear when information is from a source or if this is your own idea or opinion. In Business 305, you will follow our citation guidelines to practice including source credibility in the text of the document. This way, the reader knows your sources are credible without having to check the reference list. There are 4 pieces of information to consider including when citing sources in the text of your document. Typically, you do not need to include all 4 pieces of information. Analyze the best way to demonstrate the credibility of each source in a complete yet concise manner. You may want to include the author's name. If the author is a well-known person or an expert in the field, including their name is a good idea. If the name on its own is unfamiliar, include the person's job title and organization the first time you introduce the source. Here, Jay Tandon's expertise is explained by including the title U.S. Digital Marketing Manager at Ben & Jerry's. This shows expertise on the topic of audience segmentation and targeting. Instead of the name of the author, you can use the organization or source title to explain the credibility. In example 1, using just the name Patricia Kausman does not explain the credibility since this name is unfamiliar. Adding the Wall Street Journal, the source title is needed. To be concise, and if the author's name is not necessary in the context, you can just use the source title as shown in example 3. Please note, I've used highlighted text in this example and several others to help draw your attention. You do not need to use highlighted text in your Business 305 assignments. The Deloitte Sports Industry Outlook uses the organization names here to concisely explain the credibility. This sentence shows how to concisely demonstrate the source credibility by removing unnecessary information. Here, the credibility is shown from the source title, Mintel Reports, so you can remove the name Sarah Smith. The complete article title is not necessary here. Using article titles often makes the writing wordy. Since the exact publication date is not necessary, you can just use the month and year. While it is not always necessary to include the date, due to the topic, the pandemic and workplace trends, the month and year is helpful to provide the context. Notice the improved example also includes specific evidence, the percentage increases for online shopping and digital streaming. If the source title is unfamiliar, include a phrase to explain the credibility. Here, you can remove the article title since this does not enhance the information. However, since your reader might not be familiar with the source 9 to 5 Mac, you need to add an explanation. The About tab of a website is a good place to find information. Using this information, write a concise phrase to explain the source to the reader. If the website includes the author's credentials, as shown in the Pew Research and Forbes examples above, you could use this to help explain the credibility. Since QSR Magazine might not be familiar to your reader, you'd want to research on the website to find an explanation of the source. Based on this information found on the Contact Us page, you can add the highlighted phrase to explain the source. In Business 305, limit your use of direct quotes. As the writer, it's your job to paraphrase and cite information correctly. This finance memo shows when to paraphrase and when a direct quote is needed. Use a direct quote when the exact wording is necessary, such as a quote from an expert on the topic. Here, the CEO's response to investors is an effective place to use a direct quote. This quote from Topgolf's Vice President of International Strategy and Franchise Management is another good example of when to use a quote. When using a direct quote in Business 305, include the source so the reader knows why a quote was necessary. In this first example, it is not clear why a direct quote is used, since we don't know who provided this information. By adding the person's name and expertise, the quote is now effective to increase your credibility as the writer. The best way to cite will vary based on the evidence, the reader, and your goals. Provide enough information in the text of the document to demonstrate the source credibility. In this class, refer to the citation guidelines on Blackboard to cite your sources and create your reference list. The instructions for each assignment provide information about the sources you will use. In other classes and in your career, adapt to the guidelines and examples provided.